many games get a second chance, but some games are worth it. No Man's Sky launched with a large amount of controversy at the time, largely due to the fact that it was kind of persuaded to build up the hype before the game was really ready. Even though the game did deliver on the goods in terms of creating a procedurally generated universe, it unarguably fell down in other areas based on the expectations built on its reveal. Luckily, Hello Games and leader Sean Murray did return to the title and quietly worked away in the background, very reminiscent of how the title developed itself from the beginning. Without telling anybody anything, they've been working behind the scenes to reinvigorate, reinvent, and deliver what they promised from the start. Looking back on a title that launched just 2 years ago, and it has had updates since then, but this has achieved something way beyond my expectations, to the point where you can almost think they've rewritten large portions of their engine, which they must have done based on the results I'll cover here. From the base PS4 to the PS4 Now, and even better on the Pro, this is a magnificent update for free on a title that lets you explore the universe like never before. Taking me back to the days of Elite on the original Commodore 64, which allowed you to live in a world and a universe that was beyond any imagination on a tiny little 64 kilobyte machine. They have again used similar techniques by using mathematical algorithms to generate the universe and pretty much everything in it procedurally, rather than handcrafting and tailoring every area. This would be impossible. If this world was generated by hand tailoring, an artist generating everything manually, it would never be here. We wouldn't even be able to play it, let alone download it. The size of it would be incredible. Instead, this mathematical calculation generates every part of the world using voxel calculations, something which you could see in the original release here, as the voxel grid, very much like a pixel screen but 3D, you can see around the object. This is how voxels work. Based on how high or low the resolution is, every object fits inside this 3D box, and then you can generate, dispose, remove, add or amend any part within this voxel space, which allows you to reduce the resolution accordingly to how the game needs to be delivered. Very similar to what we saw in the Tomorrow Children and their voxel based lighting system, including up to 3 or 4 bounces of real-time lighting. Yet another title that deserved a stay of execution and a second chance. By writing their own engine, they've used this technique to generate the entire universe and everything within, give or take, with some polygon-based materials added in there too. Even the textures are procedurally generated because, again, having a systemically generated world means that UV mapping all of your objects would be pretty much an impossible task. Now, this mathematical calculation even takes into account the same process that allows you to visit the world that you've already experienced. Even though it's not being handcrafted, it will be the same. And again, the multiplayer function, which is now embedded in the title, allows other people to visit your universes and planets as well as theirs and experience the same environment. Now, on top of this, they've added additional benefits. Texture quality has been massively enhanced here from the original title. First thing is the lack of any PBR based shading, or very little at all, has been fully remedied here and implemented. You can see the specular highlights, the details, and also the normal maps have all been increased in detail and resolution. In addition to this, the actual texture resolution themselves has been hiked up, I would say at least 4 times the resolution here. You can see a lot of the objects have much denser material systems, multiple layers and decals, and obviously they now scale and stretch much better to fit the world and the objects around. In stark contrast here between the old version and the new version, you can see the details on the ground, the textures, the object quantity is obviously much higher, and the fauna and the flowers are far more detailed. Adding to this believability is the addition of ambient occlusion, which is now across everything in the title and was stark by its absence in the launch version. This makes the whole thing look more grounded and realistic, as objects touch the ground, give it contact shadows. Bushes and trees all have contact shadows amongst themselves and self-shadow, making everything seem much deeper and standing out much better, which again only complements the PBR based shading in the title. And overall, the whole visual look is enhanced by HDR, which is fully implemented here, and a very good system indeed, due to the abundant use of colours, contrast levels, and obviously the weather and dynamic lighting system. In fact, comparing the two versions here on the PS4 side by side, it looks almost like a last gen version to a now gen version, The amount of updates to the engine itself and the game overall on the two PS4 versions here is absolutely incredible. Everything from the texture quality, which we've already covered, the asset quality and the materials, the PBR based shading, the HDR lighting, the density, the improvement to the LOD system, with the algorithm being far more consistent now with drawing the world dynamically and also pushing that LOD further out and drawing more objects as a whole. The CPU drawback here must be much higher as the density of the world is improved. On top of this, they've used that voxel system to add in a complete weather simulation system now, which includes volumetric clouds, which look incredible as you walk and fly through, and obviously fly out of the atmosphere and back in, is enhanced to a level that makes the old version look quite dated now, even if it's still got a look that I actually quite like in certain places on certain planets. On top of the voxel based and height map solution they're using in the title, which is very reminiscent of a very old title, Outcast, which was used a voxel based engine according to all the press and publicity, but it didn't use voxels at all, it just used height maps, enabling the developers to create a very high undulating terrain by just setting this height map and various points, and then it just stretches between the vertex points, drawing this 3D height map which can then be cascaded across the world and gives you that real terrain look. Again, this has been running for years. I've just covered last week in my Factor 5 video, Rogue Squadron used a very similar technique on the N64. It allows you to minimise your polygon count and tessellate them on the fly, which they've used here in No Man's Sky now, tessellating the environment, allowing it to build up additional detail as you walk closer, which you can see here in the first person mode much better. This wasn't possible or wasn't present in the previous version of the title, with a very flat and bland landscape. That PBR based material shading has enhanced every element of the title, which is pushed even further with a new third person view, which wasn't present before. This allows you to see animated characters as you look around the world, the smooth movement and some inverse kinematics. It allows you to traverse the world in a far more organic manner, and this also includes per object motion blur, which has now been added into the title, giving a much smoother and cleaner look if you run it at 60 or 30 FPS, which is a choice that's now added to the title, which was added a while ago, but it works much better here, certainly on the Pro, but it is possible on the base PS4. This high sample per object motion blur you can see here slowed down does look very clean and very artifact free, a very impressive solution here, and it works just as well in first person and third person no matter the frame rate you're running the game at. Unlike the entire options here in the game, which have been added to, you can go into the options menu and tweak things from the FOV and also the motion blur speed itself, along with unlocking the frame rate. The final highlight of the additions is a crepuscular ray system, which uses occlusion on characters beaming through light areas and coming from the sun, adding to that lighting and weather system. It looks very good indeed, aside some draw order issues on the character itself and obviously the background, but overall it's still a very welcome addition. And again, the per object based velocity motion blur can jitter sometimes on the character movement, but they're very minor. Overall, this is a huge improvement to the engine and has shown already as a leading title for a game as a service system. Hello Games really are leading the way with the sheer amount of improvements they've added to the title here. And another one of those improvements is in performance. The original title was capped at 30 FPS and it held on to that pretty well. Not unsurprising with the amount of visual improvements and CPU improvements we've seen here, then we would expect performance to drop. But it's actually still a very good performing title. Fully V-synced on both the PS4 and the PS4 Pro. The PS4 targets 1920 by 1080p and it appears to do that at all times. I see no dynamic resolution being used here. And the Pro has two options, 1080p, the same as the PS4, and a full super sampled or on a 4K TV, 3200 by 1800p. Now at this point you should lock it down to 30 FPS. As per the original title here, you can see running at 30 FPS on the PS4, it holds on to that pretty much all the time. A few stutters here and there from streaming or loading or even CPU context switches, It really is a 30 FPS title with no issues and concerns at all. But moving over to the PS4 Pro and running at the 4K mode, obviously the 1800p, then it really needs to target 30 FPS. This is the unlocked frame rate version here, obviously to show you where it can go, and it hovers around the 35s to 39s, occasionally touching 40, but really nothing to really write home about. This is a 30 FPS mode. And that's not a bad thing. Remember, this is pushing around 2.7 times the amount of pixel throughput as the native 1080p mode on the PS4, with all the same visual quality enhancements that I've just talked about throughout the title. So really, this is what you need for a 4K mode. So 30 FPS is expected and enjoyed. It does dip below that at some point. It can certainly dip into the low 20s. Most of the time, this seems to be stuttering or streaming issues, certainly to do with the CPU algorithms, or maybe some memory issues there. I'm not too sure, but I'm not sure all of this is GPU bound issues overall, but it is a 30 FPS title and it holds on to that pretty well across the board. But it's not the only option available to players. You can also move this into a 1080p mode. Now remember, on the PS4 Pro, you now have an option within the video options to set super sampling. So if you want to play this on a 4K screen, but at the faster frame rate, then you have to go in and disable super sampling, which you can see here on my capture footage at 60 FPS. And this delivers pretty much 60 FPS across the board. It's a very consistent title most of the time, but again, some of those streaming and stuttering issues can come in, but this is not unexpected. With the amount of context switching and algorithms going on throughout this title, I'm not surprised if some of it does cause some of that streaming and texture issues. Remember, they have massively increased the amount of throughput here and bandwidth required for the visual quality, so that's not an unknown. Remember, this mode does run at 1080p, but it still benefits from the same temporal anti-aliasing that the 4K mode does, and that 1800p is the perfect balance, I feel, between 1440p and native 4K. It's wasted though, in my opinion, on a 1080p screen, and I would certainly pick the 60 FPS mode here, uncapping it, because it feels far smoother and more consistent overall than the standard version. Now, you can still play this unlocked on the PS4 itself by just going in and uncapping the frame rate. It still runs at 1080p, but it can deliver around the 40s, but you can see the average here from my real-time average frame rate, and you can also just read more details on the website or in the video section details below. This is an absolutely remarkable update from Hello Games, and I've been thoroughly impressed with what they've delivered. They've stuck to their guns and really worked hard to improve and push on with this title. It's now, for me, the best space exploration title ever made. Nothing comes close to the amount of versatility, expansion, and sheer wealth of experience this title offers, and certainly for the price you can pick it up online or even second-hand in the stores, I don't think you can really grumble now that this isn't delivering way above what they originally promised, and certainly that price tag offers. If you were on the fence about picking this title up, then there really is no better time than now, and it's also available on PC and the Xbox One, enhanced on the X also. I simply cannot recommend this title any higher. It leaves everything else in this genre clearly in its wake. Anyway, I hope you guys and girls enjoyed this. If you did, you can help by sharing, liking, subscribing to the channel to improve my numbers, and also follow me over on Twitter where you can chat to me if needed. This is a part-time gig for me, and I'm completely self-funded and independent, so if you can help, any pounds or dollars on my Patreon link, which is below and on the screen, will help immensely. And with that, I'm out and into the space beyond. I'll catch you on the next one.